We are almost getting to the end of geometric patterns, so I felt that it's necessary that I go through the memo with you. So let's look at the first question. They asked us to draw the next step. So we saw in step 1, there's 2 blocks, step 2, 4 blocks, step 3, 6 blocks. So each time they added 2 blocks, so the diagram you had to draw was then 8 blocks. So you added another 2. For the next one, they started with 1 block, then they had 3 blocks, so they only added those 2. Then they had 5 blocks, so they added the one at the top and the one here on the right. For my diagram then, obviously, I had to add one there and one there, and it is 7. You will see these look like rectangles, these look like squares. Doesn't really matter if your sketch is accurate as long as you have 4 blocks and then the 3 next to the 4 to make it 7. And then for the last one, you have 3, then you have 6, then you have 9. So you add 3 every time. I add my 3 and I get 12. 3, 6, 9, 12. 1 mark for each of your sketches. Just make sure you have the correct amount of blocks. Now we have to work out the rule. So remember grade 6's constant difference. What is the difference between the blocks between step 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and 3 and 4? The difference each time is 2. So if the constant difference is 2, I must multiply with 2. 1 times 2 gives me 2. 2 times 2 gives me 4. 3 times 2 gives me 6. I don't need an extra calculation because if I use times 2, it gives me the correct output. If I go to the next one, what is the difference between 1 and 3? The difference is 2. Between 3 and 5, 2 again. And 5 and 7, it's again 2. So if the constant difference is 2, I have to times with 2. If I say 1 times 2, I get 2. 2 times 2, I get 4. But I actually only need 1 and I only need 3. So if I have 2 and I have 4, what must I do? I must minus 1. I need to subtract 1 to get to my correct output. I started with 3, I added another 3, added another 3, added another 3. So the constant difference is 3. I times with 3. Step 1 times 3 gives me 3. 2 times 3 gives me 6. 3 times 3 gives me 9. Don't need to do another calculation because if I use times 3, I get the correct output. If you have the correct rules written down, you give yourself 1 mark each. If you didn't print out the worksheet, just make sure you numbered them correctly. So 1.1 had 8 blocks, 1.2, 7 blocks, 1.3, 12 blocks, 1.4 you would have written times 2, 1.5 times 2 minus 1, and then 1.6 times 3. The second question, they told us they were going to give us a rule and then we had to determine the missing values. Now, grade 6's, some of you probably got a fright. Why are we using M and why are we using K? Remember, these letters are only place values. So you can actually use any letters to show input and output. Just know input is always at the top and output will always be at the bottom. But you don't need to always use X and Y. We can use any letters. So what must we do? If we get a rule, we must simply apply it into the table. So let's see. K, which is now going to be the output. See, it's the second line, equals M plus 5. So here's M. All these values are our inputs and they equal M. So if I have M, which is 1, I add 5 and I get 6. Then M is 2 plus 5 is 7. 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 5 is 10. I skip this one. 12 plus 5 is 17. So now they give me the output. They give me K already. So do you remember what type of calculation you must do now to determine the input? Yes, the inverse. So you added 5 to something and got 13. So you have to now use that 13 and subtract the 5. If you have 13 minus 5, you get 8. Let's test it. 8 plus 5 gives me 13. So I used the inverse calculation to get my input value. You can again give yourself 1 mark for each correct answer in your table. The second example says K, remember output, equals 9 times M. So basically the rule is times by 9. 1 times 9, 9. 2 times 9, 18. 3 times 9, 27. 7 times 9, 63. 10 times 9, 90. Now I already have the answer. I've got 270. If I had X, I had to times by 9. I would have gotten 270. So what is the inverse calculation of times by 9? You have to divide by 9. So 270 divided by 9 gives us 30. And you give yourselves 1 mark for each answer. Again, if you could not print out the worksheet, just make sure you've numbered 2.2.1, 30, 2.2.2, 9, 2.2.3, 18, 2.2.4, 27, and so forth. Last example, 2.3, we have to use the rule 6 times M minus 4. So basically, times 6 minus 4. Let's use the rule. 6 times 1 gives me 6, minus 4 gives me 2. 6 times 2 is 12, minus 4 is 8. 6 times 3 is 18, minus 4 is 14. 6 times 6 is 36, minus 4 is 32. Do you see, grade 6s? You need to know your tables very well. I'm going to leave that one out for now. 15 times 6 gives me 90, minus 4 gives me 86. I already have my output value of 50, which means something was timed by 6 and then subtracted by 4, and I got to 50. So let's do the inverse. 50 plus 4 gives me 54, divided by 6 gives me 9. So I actually had 54 divided by 6, because I again used the inverse calculation. Instead of subtracting, I added, and instead of multiplying, I divided. Grade 6s, these worksheets really test all that you need to know regarding geometric patterns. You have to be able to draw the next step. You have to be able to work out a rule without using a table, only maybe having pictures or numbers. And then you need to apply a rule into a table and do an inverse calculation to work out the input and not always the output.